what makes humans different from the animals? That's the question I was reading the last time I was at the Denver Zoo. One of the things I really enjoy about zoos and museums, things like concert venues, is that there are these places where we can come and enjoy the glories of creation. They kind of stand as these testimonies, these monuments of human achievement. In a sense, they're kind of like temples for modern man. They tend to be secular, which they have every right to be. But that's why the way that the Denver Zoo answered this question was so surprising to me. We used to be able to say that what made man different from the animals was that, well, people use tools. But I guess someone somewhere saw a monkey take a stick to eat some ants. Meanwhile, we've only cured diseases, written symphonies, gone to the moon, built zoos. But a monkey used a stick to eat some ants, so, tie game, I guess. Who am I to judge? So how does the Denver Zoo answer this question? As I'm standing there reading this sign, having traveled through the Denver Zoo, everything they had told me up to that point was that we're very similar to all these other animals. After all, we all have ancestors who are fish, whether you're a giraffe or a flamingo or a penguin or a porcupine or an elephant. We all evolved from these fish, so what makes humans different from all these other, mouth-breathing fish? The way they answered it is that people worship. People worship. That's how the Denver Zoo answered that question. And you might think it's odd, but I think that the Denver Zoo is spot on here. Humans are worshiping creatures. If you look throughout time, if you look at really any culture, the thing that you can probably learn, let me rephrase that. You can learn an awful lot about a culture simply by investigating the gods that they worship. And so what I want to kind of put forth to you guys today is that it's not a matter of whether or not you're going to worship something, it's what you're going to worship. And that might sound odd to secular Western human ears, probably not here, I'd imagine. On a Sunday morning, you guys actually set aside the time to come here, so you know about the importance of worship. But our culture might not find it so important. Another question I have is why would I choose this psalm on Palm Sunday? Well, for starters, I had it ready. So there's that. But also, hear me out here. This is how I'm going to try and say this. This psalm is part of a collection of psalms called the Egyptian Hallel. And really, on every Jewish high holy day, Jews will get together and they'll recite these psalms to each other. They'll probably sing them to one another. So there's a very real chance that by the time we get to the end of Holy Week, Jesus is singing this psalm with his disciples. So it works. but more importantly here, I think by studying this psalm, we'll learn an awful lot about the events in Holy Week that eventually lead up to Jesus' crucifixion. So the text of Psalm 115 here tells us that we're designed for worship. But beyond that, it tells us that our worship has the ability to redesign us. And so to quote G.K. Beale here, we resemble what we revere, either for ruin or for restoration. Or to use the title of his book, and by no small coincidence the title of this sermon, we become what we worship. So I want to give that to you guys in three points today here. Since we become like what we worship, don't smile. There's an inside joke there. Since we become like what we worship, one, we should know about the necessity of worship, we should know where worship goes wrong, and we should know how to make it right. So the necessity of worship, where it goes wrong, how to make it right. So first off, the necessity of worship. Why would worship be necessary? Well, worship is necessary because people are constantly giving glory away. The biblical concept of glory here is really more just ascribing significance, ascribing weight, ascribing power to something else. So we're constantly ascribing significance. We're constantly giving glory to something else. But how do we do that? Well, in Psalm 115, there's a few ways that he points it out. One of the ways that we do it is that we worship and give glory to things that amaze us. Look with me at verse 1 where it says, "Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give the glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and faithfulness." Now, I want to return to that verse a little bit later, but what I want you guys to notice here is this. This psalm is speaking to the totally normal human desire to be amazed, to be caught up into something greater than ourselves. You know, why do people travel from across the world just to stare into the Grand Canyon? What is it about a beautiful piece of music that just causes us to be overwhelmed with how beautiful it is? What is it about a sunset that causes you to stop dead in your tracks just to watch it? What is it about Colorado mountains that just seem to beckon people to come and stand on top of them? What is it about these things? What is it actually about humans that causes us to enjoy being lost in something else? And to answer that, I want to quote John Piper here. He says this: "The really wonderful moments of joy in this world are not the moments of self-satisfaction, but self-forgetfulness. Standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and contemplating your own greatness is pathological. At such moments, we are made for a magnificent joy that comes from outside ourselves." And so really all I want to say here is that worship is necessary because we desire to be amazed. But worship is also necessary because we give glory to anything that promises to satisfy us. Look with me at verses 12 through 13. It says this: "The Lord has remembered us. He will bless us. He will bless the house of Israel. He will bless the house of Aaron. He will bless those who fear the Lord, both small and great." The biblical concept here of blessing is a little too big to really do a full sermon on, but I want you guys to understand it like this at least. In the story of creation, it says God creates man and woman in his image. And then in Genesis 1:28 it says, "And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it." And when it says in Genesis 1 that God blesses mankind, it's the same word being used here for blessing in Psalm 115. And essentially the idea that's being captured here is that God put humankind in a place of perfect flourishing and perfect satisfaction. God placed humankind into an environment where there was perfect harmony with their Creator, with creation, and with one another. And well, what's obvious after a week of headlines like what we've had is that we're not there anymore. I very much doubt there were poison gases in the Garden of Eden. But God has always desired to return his people to the place of flourishing and satisfaction. You got to deal with this every week, huh? All right, so God has always desired to return his people to the place of flourishing and satisfaction. He desires to bless us. Even when Israel was wandering in the desert, it says in Deuteronomy 28 that God promised them when they get into the promised land that he was going to bless them. That he would satisfy them with good rains, he'd satisfy them with good foods, probably good cattle, good wine, good babies, all those things. Like God's like, I'm going to satisfy you in these ways. I'm going to bring you into a place of flourishing. And what I'd argue here is this is kind of getting at this desire we all have, I think fairly self-evidently, to be satisfied, right? We all want to be satisfied. I mean, don't we all have within our hearts kind of these echoes of Eden? Or perhaps another way to say it is we all have within us a hunger for heaven. We all long to be satisfied, and we give glory to anything that promises it to us. And C.S. Lewis talks about the hunger of heaven like this. He says, "In speaking of this desire for our own far-off country, which we find in ourselves even now, I feel a certain shyness. I'm almost committing an indecency. I am trying to rip open the inconsolable secret in each one of you. The secret which hurts so much that you take your revenge on it by calling it things like nostalgia and romanticism and adolescence. The secret also which pierces with such sweetness that when in a very intimate conversation the mention of it becomes inevitable. We grow awkward and laugh at ourselves. The secret that we cannot hide and cannot tell, though we desire to do both. We cannot tell it because it is a desire for something that has never actually occurred in our experiences. And we cannot hide it because our experiences are constantly suggesting it. And we betray ourselves like lovers at the mention of its name, heaven. So we have a very faint memory of Eden, a very real hunger for heaven, and a very strong longing for satisfaction. And I would argue, and I think the Bible does too, especially Psalm 115, is that we're prone to worship the things that promise to satisfy us. And that's why our psalmist needs to remind us here that God is the source of all blessing, all satisfaction, and all flourishing. As the scriptures say, he is the source of life. Okay, so last thing in terms of this necessity of worship thing is that worship is necessary because we give glory to things that promise security to us. You see it in verses 9 through 11. O Israel, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. O house of Aaron, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. You who fear the Lord, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. Safety and security are human needs. I have a 5-month-old baby. Like, she needs safety. She needs security. And I just want to point out here, a nice biblical rule of thumb: if God bothers to say something 3 times in a row, probably pay attention to it. Okay? God wants us to know that he is our source of security. We are incredibly fragile creatures. I hate and I love telling this story, so bear with me, and I'm going to try and keep it together. But it was a few months ago when I first heard the story of the Powell's family. I don't know if maybe some of you guys know who I'm talking about here. Jameson Powell was studying to become a missionary in Japan. He'd spent years in theological training. He studied Japanese culture, Japanese language, and he was preparing to go with his entire family out to Japan in order to bring them the gospel. Last summer, Jameson, his wife Catherine, and their 3 young children were traveling from Minneapolis to Colorado for the last leg of their training before being sent to Japan. In a construction zone on I-80 in Nebraska, their car was struck by a semi-truck, and all 5 members of the family died. Now, it's possible, and maybe it's possible in your own heart too, but there are certainly cynical people out there who hear about stories like this and will respond like the nations do in verse 2. Where is their God? And how would you answer that? How do you answer the cynic? How do you answer the critic who looks at these sort of tragedies and asks you, where is your God? It will help us to remember that this psalm was written while the Jews were exiled. Their cities had been destroyed. They were living as exiles and refugees in a foreign nation. It was written while they were being dominated by an oppressor with no sense of safety and no sense of security. I mentioned earlier that the psalm had become part of a Jewish tradition. Every Passover, they take this psalm along with a handful of others and sing it to one another right after eating their Passover meal, right after remembering all that the Lord had done for them through the hands of Moses when he delivered them out of Pharaoh's oppressive hand. So I want you to picture yourself there, living as refugees and exiles in a place where you can see all the gods of the culture around you, all the gods of the nation that just crushed yours. And they turn to you and say, you can see our gods. Where's your God? And there are many today who look at the same tragedies happening all around the world that every single one of us in here are aware of, and will turn to us as Christians and say, where is your God? I have a friend who was studying in seminary with Jameson. In their last meeting together, Jameson, really before anyone knew what was going to happen to him and his family, Jameson encouraged his class with the words of Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted on the earth. As tragic as stories like these are, we do not grieve like those who have no hope. We can face tragedies like these with tearful joy because we know that this family's hope was not here on earth, but it's in heaven. We know that this family's security was not here on earth, but it's in heaven. And we know that this family's God is not here on earth, but like it says in verse 3, our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. This is the foundation of our security, the all-powerful, sovereign control of God. I mean, just think about it, Jesus' own words. There's not even a sparrow that falls to the ground apart from the knowledge of his Father. And are you not worth more than many sparrows? And so when we see God described like this, when we see his power, when we see his might, when we see his love, we should realize immediately the foolishness of worshiping something else. And so we move from the necessity of worship to how it can go wrong. As I said earlier, that our desires for amazement, our desires for blessing and satisfaction, our desires for security, if these are the things that lead us to worship, then hopefully it's already kind of clear how that can get messed up. Right after this psalm talks about worshiping God because of his sovereign glories, he goes on to talk about the ironic foolishness of idolatry. In verses 4 through 8, he describes all the false gods of the world as well, basically inept. They have eyes that don't see, ears that can't hear, feet that can't walk, noses that can't smell, all those sort of things. Now, for us, it may sound silly that anyone would bow down and worship a statue. You might be saying, I actually haven't had statue bowing issues for a while now. I've had to confess that I'm not really tempted towards it anymore. So this part's not really for me, is it? Well, not so fast. Because what is an idol, really? David Clarkson, he was an old Puritan writer. There's a lot of things about Puritans. You can describe them in many ways. Concise would not be one of them. He had like a 30-point sermon called "Soul Idolatry Excludes Men Out of Heaven." And he talks about two types of idolatry in that little essay, sermon, whatever. He calls them open idolatry and soul idolatry. Open idolatry is kind of what we see here in verses 4 through 8, where you're openly bowing down to a statue made of silver or gold or wood or whatever. But then he goes on to describe soul idolatry. And he describes that like this. When the mind is set on anything more than God, when anything is more valued than God, more desired than God, more sought after than God, more loved than God, then that is soul worship, which belongs only to God. And using Psalm 115, let's see where we can try to find, and a huge emphasis here on try to find, amazement, satisfaction, and security outside of God. So what does idolatry look like today? Well, it's usually when we take a good thing in creation and elevate it to the point of being an ultimate thing, elevate it to the point of really being a functional God. Here's a few examples of it. We talked already about our desire for amazement and satisfaction, amazement and pleasure, for example. It was a few years ago, I was sitting down with a young man who was trying to get free from his drug addiction. And I'll never forget how he told me he originally got addicted. He described the first time he had used this particular drug as though it were a religious experience. As soon as he took this drug, this sense of isolation, this sense of boredom, the sense of emptiness, the sense of purposelessness was overwhelmed entirely by the high. And he told me that as soon as he used it, the first thing that came to his mind was, this is it. This is it. This is what I've been looking for. This man, like many in our culture today, thought he had found his salvation at the end of the needle. But remember, idols have hands but can't feel, and those who worship them become like them. So as time wore on, what used to be enough to give this guy a high was barely enough to make him feel normal. Slowly but surely, he felt less and less. And I'm not talking only about the effects of the drug, but really felt less and less of the devastation he was doing to his own life and the lives of those around him. Now, this isn't just limited to drugs and alcohol, but it really can be the pursuit of pleasure and amazement outside of God in any sort of way. If sexual pleasure is your idol, you will feel less and less connected with the people you connect with sexually over time. Your feelings will decrease. Or, if sex is your idol, you may find yourself less and less enthralled with your lover over time. And this has led to many, many divorces, many acts of adultery. It's just, if you look for satisfaction there, if you look for amazement there, it will let you down and it will break them. Paul even talks about those who worship their bellies, and I'm sure you guys can kind of put together the pieces for how that works, both for the glutton and the food snob. So that's how the pursuit of amazement and pleasure for their own sake can get us off track. But what about blessing and satisfaction? What happens when we look for our source of flourishing and satisfaction outside of God? Jeremiah 2 talks about idolatry as though it were, it's like forsaking a fountain of living waters, taking a broken jar and trying to use that to hold water. So I think one of the areas where we see this most prominently in our culture today is in the area of relationships. I have a lot of friends, both inside and outside of the church, where the idea of a spouse has become an idol of the soul. And let me just say this, if you go into a relationship thinking that this other person is going to fully satisfy you, fully bring your life meaning and purpose, if you think they're going to be the thing that finally causes you to flourish, one, if you actually end up dating that person, you are setting yourself up for disappointment, and you are going to crush that person with your expectations. Just absolutely crush them. Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your fiance, your spouse, they were not built to carry that kind of load. So how do you know if you've made relationships into an idol? Well, if you're single, the idea of staying single terrifies you. If the idea of staying single brings you night terrors, you may have made marriage into an idol. If you're dating and the thought of another person leaving you makes you want to kill yourself, and let's just be honest here, that sort of language gets used a lot. Like, if you leave me, I will die, I will kill myself. Like, that happens all the time. If you want to die at the thought of another person leaving you, then you have made your boyfriend or your girlfriend into your God. And I'm not getting in trouble for saying this one, but a lot of us have turned our children into little gods. As long as your child is happy, as long as they're safe, as long as they're secure, you're satisfied. Now God understands the desire to bless your children. Don't get me wrong there. Like verse 14, it says, "May the Lord give you increase, you and your children." So I'm not saying that loving your kids is a bad thing, because that would contradict a whole lot of the rest of Scripture. But what I am saying is this, is that if your joy and satisfaction depend on your kid doing well, then if something ever happens to your kid, you might just turn away from God. Like, I can't believe in a God that would let this happen to my child. Or if you need to be seen as a good parent by other people, then you are going to be so overbearing and so overwhelming and harsh with your kids that you're going to kill your relationship with them. If your child's immediate happiness is your primary concern, your kid's going to walk all over you. Like the point here is that the same idol can manifest itself in different ways. Okay, so this all might sound crazy to you, but this is the sort of thing that happens when we elevate things like relationships to a degree where they become godlike in our eyes. And like I said, you'll notice it doesn't always look the same. So what about security here? Well, probably the most obvious example of that is our jobs and our money. If you trust in these things to provide for you ultimate security, ultimate safety, then you turn them into gods. If you work yourself into the ground and in the process sacrifice your family, you have made your job your God. And I'm just going to, this is just an aside, but just, you look throughout the Old Testament, all the idols ultimately demand child sacrifice. Just bear that in mind. If you lose your job and lose your sense of worth, your sense of value, your sense of dignity, then you have made your job into your God. If you lose your money in a bad investment and shake your fist at God crying out, why did you allow this to happen to me? Then it is very likely that you have made your money your God. You can probably see pretty easily how our desire for security can turn anything from politics to education to physical beauty into a functional God. But I just want to highlight this one, and this is super sticky for us as Christians, but we can worship our morality more than we worship God. If you think that your good moral performance, if you think that your ability to show up to different events at church, if you think this is the thing that's going to give you security, if you think this is what God is going to accept you for, if you think that's what's going to save you, you have turned your morality into your God. Remember the Pharisees. They were the most religious, most observant, most fastidious people in Jesus' day, and Jesus called them blind guides. They were as blind as the idols that they worshipped. Okay, so you might be listening to this and say to yourselves, honestly, it doesn't actually sound like these people have a worship problem. It sounds like they just need counseling. Totally possible. I'm willing to grant it. But my main argument here is that we have emotional and addiction issues because we have worship issues. We have relationship issues because we have worship issues. We have trust issues because we have worship issues. So what's the big deal though? Like, why does it matter whether or not we're worshiping God or we're worshiping something else? And the answer comes to us in verses 4 through 8. So let's, if you have a Bible, just look down at it. And this is really just a really scathing attack on idolatry. Verse 4. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. So first off, they're part of creation. They can't even create themselves. They literally need you to create them. They have mouths but do not speak, so they can't instruct you or even contradict you. And let's be honest, if your God can't contradict you, he's probably just a hyper-idealized version of yourself. Throwing that out there. They have eyes but do not see. They literally don't even notice you. They have ears but do not hear. They can't hear your prayers. They have noses but do not smell. They don't even care about the sacrifices that you make for them. They have hands but do not feel. They're insensitive to your needs. They have feet but do not walk. They're not with you like the omnipresent God as the Bible is. They have, and nor do they make a sound in their throat. Your neighbor's barking dog is more capable than the idols that we worship. The real tragedy and the real irony of worshiping idols is verse 8, where it says, those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them. So what does this mean? Like if I worship beauty, do I become beautiful? Because that doesn't sound so bad. Or is it saying that if I worship money, I become rich? Not quite. More likely to become wrinkled and green. Getting closer to the idea, at least. But really, what I'm getting at here is that the way you view God has a tremendous impact on the way you view your life. I didn't know if I was going to use this, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it. For example, if your view of God is that he is a harsh and disapproving father, that actually might have a tremendous impact on the way that you parent your own family. On the one hand, you could be just as harsh and disapproving as the Father in heaven you think is towards you, and so you just crush your kids because if you can't get acceptance from God, at least you can have control over your children. Or on the other hand, if you feel so rejected by God, you're like, I need to find acceptance somewhere, so you go to your kids and you're a cool parent or whatever, but really you end up becoming more childlike. You become like what you worship. It's inside. The main point here is that worshiping anything but the living God causes you to be robbed of life. It robs you of life. Now, I want to give you guys a little hint for reading your Bibles here. Whenever you see the language in the Bible that talks about your senses being dulled, your eyes becoming blind, your ears becoming deaf, your heart becoming hard, it is always talking about idolatry. Every single time, from Genesis to Revelation, this is the sort of language God uses to describe those who worship false gods. So what's the point of all this? Well, it all goes back to what I said at the beginning. You resemble what you revere, both for ruin and for restoration. And messages of judgment are pretty much never popular, but what I want to point out to you is this, is that God judges idolatry by simply letting us persist in it. From Genesis 3 to Isaiah 6 to Romans 1, the consistent message of God is that if you exchange the glory of God in order to worship idols, in order to worship false gods, then he will judge you by simply leaving you alone. And we see this in verse 17. The dead do not praise the Lord, nor do any who go down in silence. And I think that these guys in verse 17 are actually the same folks from verse 8. Because after all, we're told that idol worshippers will become as senseless as their idols. And really, what's more senseless than a dead guy? And God is saying that if you want to chase after idols, if you want to worship these things that will never truly amaze you, never truly satisfy you, never truly protect you, then you will become as spiritually dead as the idols that you worship. So does this sound bad to you? I mean, obviously it should. I mean, for someone who doesn't love the glory of God, really, this is a weird argument, but bear with me on it. If you don't love the glory of God here, really the only place worse than hell will be to stand in the presence of God himself. If they do not love God here, where his glory is still shadowed, what makes you think they would want to stand in the middle of a blazing sun? C.S. Lewis says there's essentially two types of people in this world. Those who say to God, your will be done, and those to whom God says, all right then, have it your way. So where do we go from here? If worshiping the wrong things has such devastating consequences, then how do we get it right? And that's point 3. Since we become like what we worship, we should want to get it right. What's hopefully obvious to you is that the sort of change that God demands from us is not merely behavior adjustment. It's not like we can just will ourselves into thinking about amazement, thinking about relationships, thinking about security in the right way. God is not looking for mere behavior adjustment. His aim is worship reallocation. If you merely change your behavior, you might just be changing out non-religious idols for religious idols. You're essentially switching out silver idols for gold idols. They still can't save. Now this is both daunting and liberating. Daunting because you may be able to change your behavior pretty easily. A lot of us in the church are pretty good at this. But you realize you can't change your own heart. Others of you hear this and just, oh my goodness, the guilt is so overwhelming. Like you're saying to me that even the good things that I do might not really be good because I'm doing them to serve another idol. Really? Thanks. Awesome. So what am I even supposed to do about this? The answer is nothing. There is nothing you can do. There is nothing you can do to make yourself right with God. There's no behavior you can change, no action you can take to get in the right with God. You have to look to something greater than yourself. And that's why the psalmist says in verses 14 and 15, "May the Lord give you increase, you and your children. May you be blessed by the Lord who made heaven and earth." You must look to God because you are no more able to change your own heart than you are able to raise yourself up from the dead. And this is where it becomes liberating for us, because Jesus did not come into this world in order to make bad people good. He came into the world, as someone once famously said, to make dead people live. Jesus came to give sight to the blind. He came to heal the deaf. He came to raise the dead. He came to give us new hearts. Jesus came to take those who are spiritually dead to God and make them alive to Him. And this is where we get back to verse 1. Like, why would God put Himself at the center of this whole process? Verse 1, "Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give the glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness." Okay, so how does He do this, though? Like, how does He go about being glorified through this process? And this is where I want you guys, if you have pens or if you have a really good memory, just make a mental note of this one. We've already said we become what we worship, we resemble what we revere, and this is the last one I want to give you. We become what we behold. We become what we behold. So what do I mean by that? Now I just mentioned verse 1 of Psalm 115, "Not to us, O Lord, but to your name give glory for the sake of your steadfast love and faithfulness." But if you guys have Bibles, I'll have you turn to John chapter 1. And this, you might need to put on the thinking cap, because I'm going to try to tie together a fairly complicated knot, but if you can stick with me through it, like, I promise it's worth it, okay? So John chapter 1, we're going to read verse 14. For context, though, I'm just going to set it up a little bit. In John 1, we learn that Jesus has eternally existed, that He is one with God, that He's described as the divine Son of God, who came to earth in a human body. And John, throughout this passage, refers to Jesus as the Word. So I know that's a lot to take in, but hopefully it'll make sense to you here in a moment. So John chapter 1 and verse 14. "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen His glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." And John 1:14 and Psalm 115:1 are both making references to the same biblical event in history, namely Exodus chapter 34. To give it to you really briefly, essentially what happens is Moses goes up to God and is like, "Hey God, I would like to see your glory." God's like, "No can do, you're sinful, I'm holy, you see me, you die, sorry, those are the rules." What ends up happening is God's like, I'll meet you halfway. I'm going to tuck you into the side of a mountain, and my glory will pass by you, and there I will proclaim my name to you. And so God takes Moses, tucks him into the side of a rock, passes by, and in Exodus 34:6, He declares this: the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, abounding in truth." Steadfast love and faithfulness are the same as Psalm 115:1. Gracious and true are the same as John 1. So what's the point here? Like, why the Bible gymnastics? Why am I showing off like this? Sorry, forgive me. Okay, here's the point. we can see even more of the glory of God than the writer of Psalm 115 was able to see. We can see more of the glory of God than what Moses was able to see. We can behold the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. We are being transformed into his image. We become what we behold, as it says in 2 Corinthians 3:18. And we all, with unveiled face, are beholding the glory of the Lord, being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. So how does all this work? You see, when Jesus came into this world, he worshipped God perfectly. And if we believe what the psalm tells us, that worshiping idols leads to death, then it should stand to reason that worshiping God leads to life, right? But as we all know, going through Holy Week, how does Friday end? Jesus worshipped God perfectly, and he was treated as though he were the worst idolater of all time. Why did Holy Week have to end like this? Why did Jesus have to die? You know, on the cross, Jesus' pleasure and amazement at God was stripped away when the Father turned his face away, and Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The blessing that Jesus had earned through his perfect obedience, through his relationship with God, was stripped away from him when he was cursed. As it is written, "Cursed is every man who hangs on a tree." You know, Jesus lost all the security and safety and protection that he had when his naked, vulnerable body was beaten and nailed to a cross. So why did Jesus die? It was so that idolaters like you and me could be brought to life. He gave up the amazing presence of God so that we could be welcomed into it. He gave up the blessing of God so that we could receive it. He gave up the security and the protection of God so that God's wrath would be poured out on him instead of us. Jesus was cut off from the land of the living so that we could proclaim, like our psalmist in verse 18, "We will bless the Lord from this time forth and forevermore." Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. He died and was raised so that those of us who worshiped gods of death could come and worship the author of life. And to the degree that you understand this, to the degree that you behold it, to the degree that understanding what Jesus did for you on the cross and melts your heart, will be the degree to which you become more and more like him. We become what we behold. You know, the gospel of Jesus Christ is the declaration that God will be glorified in all things, including the salvation of sinners and idolaters. The point here is that the more we perceive Jesus, the more we rehearse the gospel in our minds, the more we experience him through his word, the more we talk about him with one another, the more we meditate on what he did for us on the cross, the more we pray to him, the more we love him, the more we worship him, the more we become like him. And when Jesus comes back to restore the heavens and the earth to a place of perfect flourishing, might I suggest to you that it will be a never-ending exploration of the goodness and glory of God. We will move from glory to glory, mountain to mountain, ever onward, ever upward, and never, ever, ever forward. We will be in a state of perpetual amazement, perpetual satisfaction, and perpetual security. False gods will never die for you, which means that they can never promise this sort of future for you. Now, I want to close by, I shouldn't have said that because I'm not closing anytime soon. I want to close by pointing out a few things about Holy Week and Palm Sunday, kind of, and then we'll have a few points of application to finish up. What I hope is obvious by the time we got to the end here is that you guys realize it's really not a question of whether or not you're going to worship something, it's what are you going to worship. So here's what I want you to reflect on this week. There were crowds on Palm Sunday who were worshiping Jesus as he entered Jerusalem. And then there were crowds on Good Friday who were crying out for his crucifixion. Who were they worshiping? Who were the Pharisees worshiping when Jesus threatened their sense of control over the people and conspired to have him killed? Who was Pontius Pilate worshiping when he delivered an innocent man over to death simply to keep peace within the city? Who was Judas worshiping when he betrayed him? Who was Peter worshiping when he denied him? More to the point, who are you worshiping right now? And is this a question you're really willing to ask yourself? So to end here, What does it look like to live a life for the glory of God? And there's really hundreds of ways we can talk about it, but Psalm 115 just gives us two, so we'll look at those. One, it looks like a life that's communal, and two, it looks like a life that is a blessing. Now, first off, it's communal. It's obvious, it's actually so obvious in this text that you might miss it, but you'll notice that this psalm keeps referring to groups of people, the house of Israel, the house of Aaron, you who fear the Lord. These are all groups of people that are being addressed over and over again. Essentially, what he's saying is that we need each other to remind one another that God is trustworthy and that he will bless us. You cannot worship God in the way that he commands us to if you try to do it alone. Prioritizing Sunday worship is massively important. This is like what Jeremy was saying earlier. We call it a service, not because we come to serve God with our worship, but by sitting underneath his word, by remembering what he's done for us on the cross, God comes and serves us. But in addition to that, we as Christians, beyond just the Sunday morning routine, we need to be in one another's lives. That's why this church and really every single one of the churches in our network practices something like gospel communities. We cannot worship God alone. Left to ourselves, we will fall back to our idolatry. He has designed us to need one another. The idols that you are most blind to happen to be the idols that you worship the most. And that's why you need other people to speak into your life. And so can I just point out one thing here from the psalm as well? The psalmist keeps addressing religious professionals. This is the house of Aaron, the house of Israel, the house of Aaron. These are the priestly priests. They're the guys who get paid to worship God. And the psalmist is like, hey, you guys, remember, God is your source of security. God is your source of blessing. God is your source of truth. And this makes sense because we worship a communal God. You want to know how you can benefit a community? Behold the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You want to know how to be a good father in the community of your family? Behold the Father. You want to know how to be a good servant in the community of your church? Behold the Son. Do you want to be a source of life and blessing to other people? Behold the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, like the Apostles' Creed says. How do you be a good husband? Behold Jesus, who died for his bride. So it's communal, but secondly, when you worship the Creator rather than creation, you become a source of blessing for other people. In verse 16 it says, the heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of man. Now I'm sure there are some people in here who hear God's given the earth to man and are just like, ugh, cringe. I don't like that. I drive a Subaru. I have a Trees Are the Answer bumper sticker on the back of my Subaru. I'm sorry if you actually do that. I love you. Affirm that. Trees are the answer. What's the question? What is the question? Trees are the answer to what? Bothers me. Right. So if you're a super great environmentalist, repent of your idolatry and hear me out here. This verse might sound bad to you precisely because of the way that people use creation when they worship creation. Okay? If you use creation in selfish ways, if you use it to serve yourself, if you use creation in order to get your source of blessing, security, satisfaction, all that stuff, you're going to abuse it. However, when we see God for who he is, we see that he uses creation to bless us. So we're free to no longer have to build our significance, build our identity, build our sense of worth on the things that are created, but we can base them on the Creator. You can now use creation to worship God and to serve other people. Our jobs stop being our God and just become our jobs. We can use them to bless our coworkers and to serve our customers, all to the glory of God. Our money is just our money. We can now use it to serve and bless other people to the glory of God. Our kids are just our kids. We can feel free to bless them by raising them in the discipline and admonition of the Lord instead of heaping all of our baggage onto their backs to the glory of God. Our house is just our house. Our spouse is just our spouse. I'm not trying to sound like Dr. Seuss here. Our lives are just our lives. And now we can now use them to serve and bless other people. God is a God of blessing. He serves us by pouring himself out like living waters continually. He uses himself and his creation to bless other people. And when we worship him, we become like him. And I hope that at some level, living your life to the praise and glory of God actually sounds like freedom. So let's pray.